She was 17, poor, black, and polite. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. All she did was ask why her math test was graded unfairly. 30 minutes later, she was sitting in the discipline office, accused of threatening a teacher. But what they didn't know was that she'd been recording. And what happened next? It silenced the entire school, including the man who once said girls like her didn't belong there. If that already sends a chill down your spine, just wait. This story will remind you why silence is never empty, and why the smallest voice, when armed with truth, can shake an entire system. Tap subscribe. You're about to witness something unforgettable. No rain, but the cold slithered through coat sleeves like it was testing who would give up first. Kids stood waiting at the bus stop, their breath visible in the amber streetlights that washed over cracked sidewalks. Amara stood alone, backpack high on her shoulders, gray hoodie frayed at the cuffs. Her natural curls were tied back neatly, a few wisps curling along her brow. She didn't feel cold. Or maybe she just wouldn't let herself. This was the morning she had decided to do something nobody at Wellington High thought a girl like her would dare to do. Speak up. Not scream. Not cry. Not flip a desk or storm out. She would speak with something quieter, smarter, something that had been tucked beneath her sports bra for 3 weeks. A tiny black body cam, no bigger than a thumb, blinking silently with purpose. The school bus hissed to a stop. Amara stepped on without a word to the driver. He was the one who'd once told her friend, "If y'all acted more like the white kids, I wouldn't need this damn camera on my dash." She didn't respond. She slid into a seat near the back and rested her cheek against the window, watching the city blur past. Wellington High wasn't the worst place in the world, but it was never built for girls like her. Tuition wasn't cheap. Uniforms had to be pressed. And voices had to be the right kind of polite, not too loud, not too soft. Especially if yours came with dark skin. Slouch and you're disrespectful. Raise your hand too often and you're aggressive. Ask why your answer was marked wrong, and suddenly, you're a threat. That morning, her math class began like any other. Mrs. Durbin, with her tight blonde curls and wire-frame glasses, walked in carrying a thick folder. She didn't say good morning. She rarely did. Today was midterm test day. Amara had studied hard. For 3 weeks she'd lived in those equations, limits, derivatives, graph transformations. They danced in her head like constellations. She knew she did well, but when she flipped over her paper, her stomach dropped. Red ink. Big numbers. 68. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she turned to the second page. Question 3 correct. Question 5 also correct, but she'd been docked points for unclear formatting. Question 7, she knew that one was right. Dead right. She remembered the exact moment she wrote it. She raised her hand slowly. "Mrs. Durbin, can I ask about this grade?" Mrs. Durbin looked up, expression flat behind her glasses. "You should. Focus on your presentation. The grade stands." Amara kept her voice steady. "But question 7. Amara," the teacher snapped, "you're making me feel unsafe. If you have an issue, go to the vice principal, now." The classroom fell dead quiet. Someone chuckled near the back. Another voice whispered, "Knew she'd pop off." Amara stood. She didn't cry. Didn't argue. She reached into her bag, pulled out the body cam, and quietly pressed save. "I'll go," she said, calm as stone. "And I'll bring the recording." For a second, just a flicker, something in Mrs. Durbin's eyes shifted. But then she straightened. "Take whatever you want. That tone isn't acceptable here." In the hallway, her footsteps echoed. She didn't know where this would go. But inside her chest, her heart beat with the slow, steady rhythm of a war drum. One beat for justice, one beat for truth. One step closer to making them listen. Atlanta, a December morning. No rain, but the cold crept through jacket seams, like it had something to prove. challenging the kids standing on cracked sidewalks waiting for the school bus. The sun hadn't made it up yet. Only the streetlights cast their pale amber glow. Across the concrete, highlighting every fracture in the pavement, Amara stood there alone. Backpack high on her shoulders, gray hoodie fraying at the wrists. Her natural curls were pulled into a tight bun, a few stray strands curling along her forehead. She wasn't cold. Or at least she wouldn't let herself be. A new day had begun. And she was ready to do something no one at Wellington High expected a black girl like her to dare. Speak up, not scream. Not cry, not throw a chair or slam a desk, but speak with silence. A calculated silence. Her weapon was hidden just beneath her sports bra, a tiny black body cam, no bigger than her thumb. The bus rolled up. She stepped on without a word to the driver. He was the same middle-aged man who once told her friend, "If y'all acted more like the white kids, I wouldn't need to record everything." Amara said nothing. She took a seat near the back, the forgotten part of the bus, and pressed her cheek against the cold window. Wellington High wasn't the worst place in the world, but it had never been a place for girls like her. Tuition wasn't cheap. Uniforms had to be pressed, and your voice had to hit just the right tone. Not too loud, not too soft, especially if your skin was brown. One wrong note, you were rude. Sit the wrong way, you were disrespectful. Ask a question about your grade, and suddenly you were hostile. That morning, math class started like any other. Mrs. Durbin, with her frosted curls and wireframe glasses, walked in balancing a stack of graded exams. The air in the room was tense, but no more than usual. Except today, there were midterms to return. Amara had studied for 3 weeks. She knew she nailed it. Every formula, every limit, every derivative, they lived in her head like street signs. When the paper landed on her desk, her eyes locked on the number in red, 68. Her heart dropped before she even turned the page. Question 3 correct. Question 5 also correct, but points docked for poor formatting. Question 7 method was right, answer slightly off, but she knew she wrote it down correctly. She raised her head. "Mrs. Durbin, can I ask about this?" "Grade?" The teacher looked up, eyes narrowing behind her glasses. "You should focus on how you present your work. The grade is final." "But question 7, Amara," her voice sliced through the room like a blade, "you're making me feel unsafe. If you have an issue, take it up with the vice principal." Now, the class froze. A snicker echoed from the far side of the room. Someone whispered, "Knew she'd go off." Amara stood up. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She opened her backpack, pulled out the body cam, and pressed save. "I'll go," she said evenly. "And I'll bring the recording." For a split second, something flickered across Mrs. Durbin's face. But it vanished just as quickly. "Take whatever you want," she replied. "That tone of yours is unacceptable." In the long hallway, her footsteps echoed, cold and deliberate. She didn't know what would come next. But in her chest, her heart beat like a war drum. One beat for truth. One for justice. The door to the disciplinary office clicked shut behind Amara with a sound. Too soft to echo, but too sharp to forget. It didn't slam, didn't creak, just that precise little click, like a key turning in a lock. Inside, it was warm. But the kind of warmth that didn't reach the skin. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, casting their pale, unforgiving glare over every surface. Walls painted beige in the early 2000s. A motivational poster with the word "Integrity" in bold capital letters hanging slightly crooked above a file cabinet. And behind the wide wooden desk, Mr. Richard Geller, assistant principal. Age, probably 53. Hair clipped close, like the military men Amara had seen in old photos of her father. Tie perfectly knotted. Posture so straight, it looked uncomfortable. He was the kind of man who measured worth by posture, GPA, and how many syllables you used to say, "Yes, sir." And right now, he didn't even bother looking up. He was writing something slowly, methodically, his pen tapping the page like a metronome. Amara didn't sit. Not yet. She stood just beyond the chair, backpack still on. The weight of it dug into her shoulders, but she wasn't ready to take it off. Not here, not yet. Finally he looked up. His eyes landed on the Wellington crest pinned to her blazer. Then on her face. "You're Amara Jones." Not a question, not an accusation either. Just a confirmation. But it still carried the tone of a man who already knew exactly what kind of person she was. She nodded. "I've just spoken with Mrs. Durbin." He set the pen down precisely parallel to the edge of the paper. "She reports that you displayed threatening behavior in class. That you raised your voice, questioned her authority, and made her feel unsafe." Amara didn't flinch. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head. Not this office, not this exact man, but this power dynamic. The scene where she would be framed, judged, and expected to apologize for someone else's fear. "I didn't raise my voice," she said. "And I didn't threaten anyone. I asked about my grade. She says otherwise. I have proof." Geller raised an eyebrow. "Just one." It was so practiced, so precise. It might have been something he'd taught himself in front of a mirror. Amara reached into her jacket pocket slowly, like she was defusing a bomb, and pulled out the small black body cam. She laid it gently on his desk. "I recorded the entire class." Silence. Geller didn't touch the device. His fingers curled around the edge of his desk instead. "You recorded a classroom without authorization?" "I recorded what I saw, what I heard. Because no one ever believes me otherwise. You do understand that this violates Wellington's electronic recording policy." Amara stared at him. "And what about violating me?" There it was. That small tremor in the room. The shift. For just a moment, his mouth opened slightly like he might say something human. But then he blinked, and the mask came back. "I'm going to need to call the district's legal counsel." He reached for his phone. She said nothing. She sat down. The leather seat was too stiff, and it made a soft creaking sound when she shifted. She didn't let her backpack touch the floor. It stayed on her shoulders like armor. The minutes ticked by. Outside, the sound of students switching classes drifted in a door, slamming shut. A cluster of boys laughing too loudly, someone squeaking their sneakers on purpose. Inside, it was just her and the hum of the air vents. Until the knock. A soft tap, followed by the door creaking open, just enough for Ms. Laurel's secretary. Lipstick too red for this job, heels that clicked like a clock to slip her head in. "Her parent just called," she said, not bothering to whisper. "Please don't take action until they arrive. He's on his way." "He," Geller frowned. "Her father," Laurel shrugged. Called from a hospital line. Grady sounded intense. Geller turned back to Amara, studying her. Really studying her this time. "What does your father do?" Amara held his gaze. "He's dead." Silence. "That was my mom." Another pause, and then the door opened again, this time fully. The woman who walked in wasn't what anyone expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, still in hospital scrubs, gloves on. Mask hanging from one ear. Her eyes the same shape as Amara's, only wearier, scanned the room like it was an EA and someone was bleeding out. "Can I help you?" Geller asked, standing up halfway. "I'm the woman who kept your sister alive after her stroke," she said, pulling off the other glove. "And I'm the mother of the girl you're trying to bury under paperwork." Amara almost smiled, almost. Geller blinked, the way people do when they're not used to being recognized. Ms. Jones stepped forward. "Let me guess. She's been labeled defiant, aggressive, difficult." Geller didn't answer. She asked a question. "You're punishing her for that?" "She recorded a classroom without consent." "She wore a camera," her mother said evenly, "because last time she reported a teacher calling her urban. She was told she misunderstood. The time before that, they said she must have imagined it." You've created an environment where my daughter has to document her own education just to be believed." The room shrank. Not physically, but something in it constricted, like the oxygen got thinner. "Are you threatening me, Ms. Jones?" "No," she said. "I'm educating you." Geller opened his mouth, closed it, and then Amara spoke. "Mr. Geller," she said, voice calm, "you're trying to turn this into a policy violation. But this is about dignity. You want me to apologize for making someone uncomfortable when all I did was ask about my own work." His face tightened, not in anger. In something harder to name. Embarrassment, maybe. Or fear. Outside, another bell rang. But inside, something else had just begun. There was a pause of full, pregnant silence that filled the room like thick smoke. Geller stayed standing, but he'd stopped breathing through his mouth. His eyes flicked between Amara and her mother, as if searching for some chink in the wall they'd just built in front of him. Ms. Jones stepped forward. Her voice never rose, but it didn't need to. Every syllable she said was carved, not spoken. "Let's not pretend this is about a recording. You're not scared of cameras. You're scared of what they reveal." "Mrs. Jones," Geller began again, and this time he tried a new tone, the bureaucratic one, laced with hollow professionalism. "I understand your frustration, but school policies are flexible when it's convenient," she interrupted. "I know. I've watched it happen. I've watched kids be protected for far worse. But not kids who look like mine." She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her bag and laid it flat on the desk. It was a printed transcript of Wellington High's own student handbook. Section 6.3. 2. Electronic devices and exceptions for personal safety. "I believe this policy states," she said, tapping the paper, "that recordings are permitted when the student believes they are being subjected to harassment or discrimination." Geller didn't answer. He didn't even pretend to read the paper. He just stared at the text like it was a fire alarm he didn't know how to turn off. "I want the full incident reviewed," she continued, "by someone outside this building. And I want Amara back in class by the next period, with no disciplinary record. If not, we'll see how the district responds to a public complaint filed with evidence." Amara could feel her heartbeat again. Not the racing, panicked kind. Something steadier, grounded, like the bass line of a song finally starting to play under her ribs. "Fine," Geller muttered. "We'll review it." "You'll clear her record," Miss Jones said. You'll clear it." He didn't respond, but he nodded. That was enough for now. They turned and walked out together. No one stopped them. No one said a word. The hallway outside was buzzing with voices. Bells had rung. Classes were changing, but for Amara, everything felt quieter. Her feet hit the tile with more weight than before. Not because she was tired, because she was claiming space. When they stepped outside into the light, Ms. Jones finally let out a slow breath. "You okay?" Amara nodded. But she wasn't okay. She was changed. And she wasn't done. Over the next 24 hours, the video quietly made its way online. Amara hadn't posted it. She wasn't sure how it got out. Maybe her mom, maybe a friend. Maybe it was just time. But there it was. The footage, Durbin's tone, her words, her face as she dismissed Amara's questions. The exact moment she said, "Girls like you need to stop questioning authority." Clips started circulating on TikTok, then Twitter. Then Reddit. #justice for Amara trended. By midnight. Students started sharing their own stories. "She told me I looked too urban when I wore braids. She made me redo an essay because she said my voice wasn't academic. She said I was being aggressive for asking why my answer was wrong too." By the following morning, the parking lot outside Wellington had 3 news vans. School board released a statement. "We are taking these allegations seriously and will conduct a thorough review." Inside, Mrs. Durbin called out sick. And Amara? She walked into school that day like it was hers, Because in a way, it finally was. They didn't ask her to speak. No one handed Amara a microphone or begged for her side of the story. But when the school board scheduled a closed-door community response forum, and the flyer said, "Parents and students encouraged to attend," Amara knew she wasn't going to sit quietly in the crowd. The night of the forum, the cafeteria had been transformed. Folding chairs in neat rows. A long table up front with 5 school board members, and the principal, Mr. Halbert, at the center. A wooden podium to the side. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like nervous butterflies. Amara sat in the second row next to her mother. Miss Jones had her arms crossed. She didn't wear scrubs this time. She wore a tailored blazer. Navy blue. And the expression of a woman who had scrubbed blood off her shoes and gone back for more. Parents filled the room. Some students too. Teachers stood in the back, arms folded. Phones were already out recording, pretending not to. A buzz of anticipation floated through the space, like the static charge before a storm. The principal cleared his throat. "We want to begin tonight by reaffirming our commitment to safety, academic excellence, and respect for all students." "Then why is my daughter afraid to speak up in class?" Someone shouted from the back. Murmurs rose. Another parent added, "My son's been told to act less street in 2 different classrooms." More murmurs. Principal Halbert held up his hands. "We understand emotions are high, but we ask that you allow us to. Can I say something?" The voice was quiet, but cut through the noise like glass through cloth. Amara stood up. The murmuring stopped. Cameras angled. Board members shifted in their chairs. She walked slowly to the podium. Body upright, face unreadable. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it filled every corner of the room. "I didn't want to go viral," she began. "I wanted to be heard." People stopped fidgeting. "I've been told I'm aggressive for asking questions. That I'm disrespectful for making eye contact. That I'm a problem for not staying quiet. But you know what no one ever said? That I was right." She paused. Just long enough to let it land. "I recorded my classroom because I knew no one would believe me. I did it because I watched other black girls get silenced and punished and labeled, while their white classmates were excused with a smile. I did it because I'm tired of being seen as a threat for just existing." Gasps. One woman in the front row wiped her eyes. Miss Jones didn't blink. "I didn't want to fight the system. I just wanted to learn in peace. But I guess when you look like me, peace isn't part of the curriculum." Silence. Not the polite kind, not the stunned kind. Then clapping. One student. Then another. Then a wave. A standing ovation. The school board didn't move. But their faces changed. They had just witnessed something they couldn't redact. And Amara? She stepped back from the mic, not smiling. Just breathing, solid, unbreakable. The war was far from over, but the silence was done. It started with a PTA email chain titled, "Moving Forward with Grace." The subject line alone was enough to make Amara roll her eyes. Grace. As if the people who'd tried to bury her voice last week now deserved a gentle transition. But what came next? That was the punchline. Mrs. Dervin, yes, that Mrs. Dervin requested to meet privately with Amara and her family to foster healing. She didn't call, didn't write a personal note. She sent a mass email to the board CCing half the administration and ending with, "This is all a learning experience for us." Amara stared at the screen. Her mom read it aloud. Then silence. Then Ms. Jones said flatly, "She spelled your name wrong, indeed." The message read, "Dear Amara and family." "Grace," Amara muttered. "Got it." They didn't respond. Not then, but the week that followed became a series of ironic detours. The kind that made you laugh, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was punching a wall. First, a local cafe posted on Instagram about how proud they were to support students like Amara, and offered her a free cookie, 1. Single. Cookie. Oatmeal raisin. Do they think I'm a Sesame Street character? She said. Then came the sudden rush of friendliness from teachers who had never spoken to her before. Mr. Keller from chemistry, who once asked her if she'd considered a trade school, now smiled and said, "Hey, champ." Champ of what? She whispered to her friend Danielle. Of making racists nervous. Danielle replied. But nothing topped the moment in the school parking lot. 3 days after the forum, when a woman in pearls and tennis shoes, president of the PTA, approached Amara with a forced grin. "You're just so brave," the woman said. "So articulate." "I told my husband, she's like a young Michelle Obama," Amara blinked. "Because I can speak?" the woman laughed. "You know what I mean. We just weren't expecting someone so composed." "So black?" Amara asked. The woman froze. No, just composed." It was like watching someone walk into a glass door in slow motion. Hilarious, tragic, predictable. Amara told her mother about it that night, and Ms. Jones only raised an eyebrow. "Baby, the world will hand you backhanded compliments wrapped in praise like it's candy. That doesn't mean you have to eat it." At school, things were shifting, subtly, unevenly. Some kids rallied around Amara, others avoided her like she was radioactive. A few whispered things just loud enough for her to hear. "Guess I can't talk in class or I'll be on YouTube." Better not argue with her, she records everything. But the real twist came Friday. Ms. Durham, a long-time English teacher with a penchant for dramatic monologues, decided to hold a classroom debate on freedom of speech. She assigned sides randomly. Amara was placed on opposing, unregulated expression. "Convenient," Danielle muttered. Amara smiled. "Let's give them a show." By the end of class, she had quoted James Baldwin, cited school district precedent, and politely dismantled 2 students' arguments without raising her voice. One kid clapped. Ms. Durham looked like she had bitten a lemon. After class, Ms. Durham stopped her at the door. "You have a gift," she said. "If you ever want a letter of recommendation for college or to get back into class after being falsely accused." Ms. Durham blinked. "Just wondering," Amara said, and walked away. Then came Monday. The intercom buzzed after third period. "Amara Jones, please report to the front office." She took her time. Walked slowly. When she arrived, she saw 3 people waiting. Principal Halberd, a district representative, and shock of all shocks, Mrs. Durbin. Gone were the sharp heels and superior posture. She wore a cardigan and had clearly spent time rehearsing the crease of concern on her face. "Amara," she began. "Thank you for coming. I want to apologize." Amara nodded slowly. "For what, specifically?" Durbin paused. "That wasn't part of the script. For my tone and my response. I should have handled it differently." "You mean when you said I made you feel unsafe for asking about math?" "Yes, that. And I didn't realize how I sounded. But I did." Amara said. "That's why I recorded it." There was a beat of silence. The district rep cleared their throat. "We're hoping this can be a moment of growth," they offered. "Growth requires roots," Amara said. "And you can't grow anything in soil that denies it's poisoned." She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just stood there, 16 years old, delivering truth like a verdict. And then, in the most awkward twist, yet Durbin offered her a hug. Amara blinked. "Respectfully, no." The press conference came 2 days later. Officially, it was a statement of community healing, hosted in the school auditorium. But everyone knew what it really was. Damage control. 3 rows of folding chairs faced a podium, flanked by the American flag and a school banner that hadn't been dusted in months. Principal Halberd stood stiffly beside Mrs. Durbin, who wore a new blouse in the face of someone who had been coached on how to look apologetic without admitting guilt. Amara sat in the back, not hidden, observing. Danielle sat beside her, whispering commentary under her breath like it was an awards show. They brought a diversity poster? Really? On stage, the superintendent stepped to the mic. We are here today to move forward. With transparency, unity, and the unwavering belief that every student matters. Behind him, Mrs. Durbin blinked. Once, twice, maybe on cue. We've listened, he continued, and we've learned. And to that end, Mrs. Durbin would like to share a few words. She stepped forward, clearing her throat. In light of recent events, I have done a lot of reflection. And I realize now that some of my behaviors may have been perceived by some as unintentionally hurtful. Danielle muttered, perceived, by some, as possibly offensive. Nice dodge. Durbin went on. I never meant to make any student feel less than. My job has always been to lift students up. And I apologize for any pain that may have been caused. Amara leaned forward. Pain wasn't an allergy. It didn't just happen in the air. Someone caused it, but the best part? The district passed out restorative justice feedback cards to everyone. 5 smiling emoji faces to rate how safe and included attendees felt today. Danielle filled hers in with a Sharpie and drew a 6th emoji, a face rolling its eyes. Then came the moment no one scripted. In the queue and a portion. A 3rd grader, yes, 3rd grade, stood up in the front row. He wore a Spider-Man hoodie and held the mic like it weighed more than him. If Amara did the right thing, he asked innocently, why are y'all acting like she did something wrong? The room went still. Principal Halberd stammered. Well, that's a good question, but if y'all were wrong, why didn't you say sorry the first time? Laughter, not cruel, nervous. From the crowd. Danielle whispered, this kid is dangerous, I love him. Amara smiled. Someone in the audience started clapping, then others joined. Not for Durbin. For the Spider-Man kid. And for Amara, that night. Amara's inbox filled with messages. Some were supportive. Some were performative. Some came from old classmates who once ignored her, now wanting to collaborate on projects about youth leadership. But the one that hit hardest came from a girl named Faith. Hey, we never talked much, but I just wanted you to know. I recorded too. When I was in 6th grade with Mrs. Lowell, no one believed me. I didn't post it. I deleted it. I wish I'd done what you did. Amara sat with that message for a long time. Then she replied, it's not too late. You still have your voice. And still, the awkward kept coming. The school installed a student empowerment bulletin board outside the main office. It had cutout letters and construction paper stars. One star said, speak up like Amara. It had a photo of her. Cropped poorly. Pixelated. They made you a mascot, Danielle said. Amara sighed. I'd rather be a warning. Still, not. Everything was hollow. Mr. Clements, her black history teacher, pulled her aside after class. You know what Baldwin said? He asked. The paradox of education is that as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which they are being educated. Amara nodded slowly. I feel like I live in that paradox now. He smiled. Then keep living in it, loudly. The week after the press conference, things got weirder. Wellington High's administration, in a bold yet utterly clueless move, announced they would be holding a Student Voices Recognition Assembly. Guess who the guest of honor was? Yep, the same girl they tried to suspend 2 weeks earlier. They didn't ask Amara if she wanted to be part of it. They just printed a flyer with her photo again, cropped terribly, and a tagline. One voice can change a school. It was posted across campus. Danielle snapped a pic and sent it to Amara with the caption, welcome to your TED Talk. Amara asked her mom if she should attend. Ms. Jones looked at her over the kitchen table. You have to decide what kind of story this is. Are you the girl who takes the stage? Or the girl who lets them feel uncomfortable in silence? So Amara skipped it. She stayed home that day, drank mint tea, wrote in her journal. Let the world swirl in her inbox without answering. The assembly went on without her. People still clapped. A vice principal cried. They gave a certificate of courage to her empty chair. Danielle texted. They played an instrumental version of Rise Up. I almost choked on my own eye roll. But perhaps the funniest part came weeks later, when Mrs. Dervin, yes, again assigned an essay to her. Class titled, Who is Someone You Admire and Why? One student wrote about Amara. When Durbin handed back the paper, she had crossed out the word hero and written, Be more objective. It ended up online. Again, and this time, it wasn't just students sharing. National news picked it up. Headlines. Teacher who sparked viral video now editing praise for student activist. Be more objective. The new motto for silencing black girls. Durbin was put on indefinite leave. Again, and this time Amara didn't flinch. She just went to class, sat in the front row, took notes, and when the substitute tried to mispronounce her name, she corrected them, not loudly, but clearly. That Friday, Amara visited the elementary school where her little cousin attended. It was career day, and her aunt had asked her to come speak. She wasn't sure what to say to second graders. But when she arrived, they already knew who she was. You're the girl with the truth camera. One shouted. Another asked if her body cam shot lasers. She laughed. No lasers, just light. What do you want to be when you grow up? A girl asked. Amara thought for a second. Safe, she said. And loud and not sorry. That night, Amara sat in bed, journal open, pen uncapped. She stared at a blank page for a long time. Then she wrote, They tried to give me a microphone. I gave them a mirror. They handed me shame. I handed it back wrapped in facts. They wanted me quiet. I made them listen. They made a mistake. They picked the wrong girl. Before there were body cams and board meetings and hashtags, there were Thursdays. Every Thursday night, Amara would wait by the window. Her mother worked the E-shift at Grady. 12 hours straight, starting at 7 p.m. If she got lucky. She'd hear the click of keys in the lock by 8:05 the next morning. If not, Amara would heat leftover pasta and sit with her back against the door, pretending the house was still full. The silence wasn't loud. It was heavy. The kind of heavy that settles in your chest and decides to stay. Sometimes, the neighbors' dog barked all night. Sometimes it was sirens. Once, it was a knock on the door. Wrong apartment. Drunk delivery driver. But every time, Amara flinched like the knock was for her. Like news was coming, because once it had. She was 10 when her father died. A roadside bomb in Fallujah. No goodbye. Just a folded flag and a man in uniform saying things like honor and duty, while her mother shook silently beside her. After the funeral, people brought food. Macaroni, cornbread, a bundt cake no one touched. Amara watched the grown-ups talk around her, like she was too young to understand that her life had just split into a before and an after. She heard her mother sob into a towel. Not because it muffled the sound, but because it didn't, because it let the grief soak in. Amara stopped asking about heaven that week. At school, people called her quiet, well-behaved, mature. What they meant was, she didn't cry out loud, but she cried. She cried into her pillow, into library books, into worksheets she never turned in. She wrote letters to her dad she never sent. Dear Daddy, Mom misses you but pretends she doesn't. I miss you and pretend I'm fine. Today, a teacher told me I was lucky I had strong black genes. I don't know what that means. Love, Amara. She never showed those letters to anyone until the night after the assembly. She was in her room, the lights off, phone buzzing with interviews she hadn't agreed to. Her mother tapped the door. Can I come in? Amara nodded. Her mom sat beside her. For a moment, neither said a word. Then her mom whispered, You were always brave. Even when you were little. I remember you walking into that funeral home holding my hand like you were the one comforting me. Amara didn't look up. I wasn't brave, she said. I just knew I couldn't fall apart. If I did, who would hold us together? Ms. Jones exhaled. That wasn't your job, baby. But it became mine. They sat in silence, the kind that heals slowly. Like stitches. Then Amara stood and walked to her drawer. Pulled out a small stack of folded paper. Handed it over. Her mom read. Slowly, carefully. Tears didn't fall, but her throat moved like swallowing stones. She folded the last letter. You don't have to be strong all the time. I know, Amara said, but I don't know how not to be. Her mom reached out and held her. Not tight. Not soft. Just enough. And for the first time in a long time, Amara let herself be small. The first time Amara realized her voice made people nervous. She was 8. She had corrected a teacher. Not rudely, just matter-of-factly. The question on the board was about planets, and Mrs. Mays had said there were 8. Amara raised her hand. What about Pluto? Mrs. Mays smiled, but the kind that had corners and not warmth. That's been debated, sweetheart. Amara had nodded. But later that day, Mrs. Mays wrote on her progress note, Amara tends to challenge authority. Needs to work on tone. Her mother framed it on the fridge like a joke, but it never felt funny. Middle school made it worse. Group projects where she did the work and someone else presented. Teachers who looked surprised when she aced a test. One counselor told her, You're very articulate. Your parents must speak a lot of English at home. I was born in Atlanta, she said. The woman blinked. Still, you're very polished like a surface. Like she was furniture. So she polished herself, on purpose. Walked straighter, talked cleaner. Made herself unbreakable from the outside. But on the inside? She screamed. There had been one teacher, Mr. Brown. Social studies. 7th grade. He was young. Wore cardigans with elbow patches. Told stories like history was alive and breathing. And he saw her, not just her grades, not just her posture. He saw her. You're not too much, he told her once. There. Just not enough. Then he left. Transferred out before the year ended. No explanation. Rumors said he didn't agree with how discipline was handled at the school. That he wrote letters. That he tried to speak up. She never saw him again. But she never forgot that sentence. Amara opened her journal again the next day. Wrote 3 lines. They said I had an attitude. What I had was a memory. What I carried was everything I couldn't say out loud. She closed the book and stared at the ceiling. There was no going back. But there was a kind of peace in knowing she didn't have to go forward, pretending she hadn't been wounded. She could be both hurt and strong. Both broken and healing. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be real. It began with an envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just slipped into Amara's locker one afternoon between 6th period and the final bell. Inside, a printed document, a scanned memo, a single handwritten post-it note. You deserve to know the whole story. She unfolded the papers slowly. It was a disciplinary referral. Not hers. Dated 3 years ago. Filed by Mrs. Durbin. The name on it? Mr. Brown. Her favorite teacher. The one who vanished without warning. The memo was marked internal only. It accused him of disruptive pedagogy and undermining school expectations. At the bottom, a note from the principal. Staff who challenge chain of authority may not be a good cultural fit. Amara read it twice, then a third time. She felt something break, but it wasn't pain. It was recognition. A puzzle piece falling into place. Mr. Brown hadn't left. He'd been pushed out, for seeing her, for naming what others refused to admit. She showed it to her mom that night. Ms. Jones read in silence, jaw clenched. They cleaned house, she said finally, quietly. That's how they keep it going. No blood, just erased names and sealed files. Who gave this to me? Amara whispered. The answer came 2 days later. A girl named Rosalind. She wasn't a friend. Just someone Amara knew from music class. Always quiet, always in the back, sketching in the margins of her notebook. They passed each other in the library. You got it? Rosalind asked. Amara blinked. That was you? Rosalind nodded. My mom works in admin. I saw them shredding files last year. I took photos of some. Printed that one when I saw your video. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Rosalind looked down. I was scared, still am, but I figured if you were brave enough to be loud, I could be quiet and useful. The next twist came during a school board meeting. A man in uniform spoke during public comment. Retired Army. Introduced himself as Captain Elijah Moore. He looked at Amara from the podium. I served with Sergeant Marcus Jones, he said. He saved my life in 2009, shielded me with his own body during a mortar strike. I would have died if he hadn't stepped forward. Gasps in the audience. Amara froze. I didn't know Marcus had a daughter until last week, Captain Moore continued. But I saw her speech, her strength, her fire. And I recognized him, not in her face, in her courage. He stepped back from the mic. Amara sat still, chest tight. Her hands trembled. After the meeting, he walked over, gently. I owed your father my life, he said. Looks like now I owe you too. The story wasn't just hers anymore. It was connected to history. To voices silenced. To teachers erased. To fathers buried under flags. And Amara? She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was picking up where others were forced to stop. They didn't expect the students to organize. Not the teachers. Not the administrators. Not the parents who still thought of kids as too distracted, too lazy, too glued to their screens to care. But by Friday morning, the front lawn of Wellington High was covered in cardboard signs. We are not distractions. Ask questions. Expect respect. I am not a threat, I'm a student. Over 300 students walked out of first period. Silently, no yelling. No fights, just rows of teenagers standing in the cold with backs straight and mouths shut. Danielle stood beside Amara, clutching a poster she made the night before. It read, her voice saved me. News helicopters circled above. Reporters lined the sidewalks. One of them asked Amara for a quote. She turned to them and said, this isn't a protest. This is a mirror, look at it. The district called an Adentogi. Emergency town hall. Held it in the gym. They set up microphones, plastic chairs. Security guards near every door. They expected chaos. What they got was a chorus, one by one. Students stepped up. I've been told to calm down every time. I stand up for myself. My brother got suspended for wearing a hoodie. No one asked if he was cold. They say we're disruptive, but they've disrupted our dignity for years. A student named Jonatal, soft-spoken, usually invisible, stepped up and said, if Amara hadn't spoken up, I'd still think silence was safe. Parents followed. I raised my daughter to ask questions. You punished her for doing exactly that. My son wanted to drop out. After seeing what happened here, now he wants to study law. Then they called Amara to the mic. She walked slowly. No notes, no script. She looked out at the gym packed with faces, students, parents, board members, teachers. She breathed once. Then spoke, I never wanted to be your symbol. I just wanted to be a student. Pause. But when the system makes it impossible to just learn, you realize your silence isn't protecting you, it's protecting them. Murmurs. Heads nodding. I've been called aggressive, difficult, dangerous. I've been told to shrink. To soften my tone. To wait for a better time. She leaned into the mic. But here's the thing. If you keep waiting for the right time to be respected, you'll grow old and never know how it feels. A few claps. Then more. She held up the original referral form. The one where Mrs. Durbin labeled her a threat. This piece of paper almost changed the course of my life. It's just ink, but ink has power, so does a voice. So I used mine, and I'm not the only one. She looked over at Jonah, then at Rosalind in the third row, then at the empty chair in the back labeled Reserved Mr. Brown. I speak. For the ones who couldn't, who were pushed out, erased, shamed into silence. I speak because they deserved better. And because I finally believe, so do I. Thunderous applause. Not the kind that fades, the kind that breaks things open. Later that week, the district announced a formal policy review. They invited Amara to be on the advisory panel. She said no. I don't want to advise a broken system, she told them. I want to build something new. And then she walked away. To the sound of students behind her, not clapping, not chanting. Just walking with her. Step for step. Graduation came early that year, not on the calendar. In Amara's spirit, she still had months left of school, exams to take, colleges to apply for, but something had shifted. She walked the halls with a different posture now. Not because she was trying to look strong, but because she no longer had to try. The weight had moved from her shoulders to the air around her, and she was no longer carrying it alone. One afternoon, she sat alone in the library. The window beside her filtered warm spring light across the table. In front of her sat two open notebooks, one filled with equations, the other with words. She looked between them for a while. Then she turned to the one with words. She began to write. Sometimes justice is not a courtroom. It's a cafeteria table where a girl dares to say, I don't accept that. Sometimes change doesn't start with a megaphone, but with a whisper that refuses to die. Sometimes the loudest rebellion is surviving with your softness intact. She wrote until her hand ached. Not for a grade, not for applause. Just because the words were finally hers. At the end of the school year, the principal offered her the Civic Impact Award. She turned it down. Instead, she nominated 3 other students, Rosalind, Jonah, and a boy named Malik, who had once been suspended for non-compliance after refusing to stand for the pledge. They're the reason this happened, she said. I just lit the match. The room went quiet. Then someone said, she lit it. But we were the fire. On the last day of school, Amara stood outside by the front steps, Danielle beside her, backpack slung low. Air warm with summer, just beginning to hum. A teacher walked by and said, we'll miss you next year, Amara. She smiled politely, but what she wanted to say was, no, you'll remember me, and she hoped they would, not because she had gone viral, not because she'd stood at podiums, not even because she had made them uncomfortable, but because she had made them look, because she had taught them how to listen. The day after graduation, she visited her father's grave. A simple headstone. Clean. Quiet. She sat cross-legged beside it and pulled out a letter. Dear Daddy, you didn't get to see me grow up, but I grew, anyway. You didn't get to teach me how to fight, but I learned. They tried to make me small. I stayed big. They tried to make me afraid. I stayed loud. I think you would have liked who I became. Love. Your daughter, the one they tried to silence. She placed the letter beside the stone, then stood, shoulders back, sun in her eyes, and walked forward. Not fearless, but free. She didn't throw fists. She didn't scream. She didn't burn the school down. But she burned through every wall they tried to put around her, and in doing so, she lit the path for others. This wasn't just Amara's story. It was a mirror held up to every place where silence is mistaken for obedience. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Share it, speak it, and subscribe for more voices the world tried to silence. Because when the system forgets us, we remember each other.